Chapter 14. Enough, Lord. How gracious he will be when you cry for help. As soon as he hears, he will answer you. Isaiah 30, verse 19. After 15 months of chemotherapy, the poison was taking an increasingly stronger toll on my body. At the beginning, the treatment was bearable, but it seemed that each Wednesday in the city grew more difficult. I was feeling significantly worse the day of treatment, and it was taking longer to recover. The nights of the treatment were becoming intolerable, with the burning in my abdomen building to a point where I irrationally feared that my insides would explode. I would awake at least once each night, the few nights after chemotherapy, with night sweats, far worse than any I had experienced at the beginning of my many months of treatment. My pajamas would be soaked through, making it necessary to shower, and occasionally to lay a towel over my side of the bed, too exhausted to change the sheets and not wanting to wake Derek. Though my face would drain of all color the day I received chemotherapy treatment, my face would be bright red the day following. My skin was hot to the touch, yet my burning insides felt chilled. I remember several nights after chemotherapy when I would fall asleep on the throw rug in our bathroom, fearing that I would not have time to make it to the bathroom from the bed if nausea overcame me. Ironically, I vomited only once during the 18 months I received chemotherapy. But there were many nights I prayed to be able to empty my stomach, even though I feared this would not lessen my suffering. The nights spent on the bathroom floor were thankfully short-lived. Derek would inevitably awaken, find me not in the bed, and come looking for me. He knew the chances that I would vomit were little to none, so he would gently lead me back to the bed, where he would hold me as I wrestled to fall asleep. It gave me indescribable comfort knowing he was aware of my pain and praying desperately for me to feel better. The following morning, I always felt dramatically better, but I seemed to feel weaker and slightly sicker even during this day after treatment as the weeks passed. During one appointment, I finally reported neuropathy, or tingling in my fingers and toes. I had not mentioned it for a few months, thinking it was an unnecessary complaint. However, I was rewarded with immediate removal of one of the chemotherapy drugs, cisplatin. The effects were a bit better after that, but I was growing tired of continually feeling bad. I had begun taking a narcotic for the pain and nausea the day of and the day after treatment, and I hated to use drug after drug to cover the effects of the chemotherapy. We were thankful that in the past 15 months the chemo had remained completely stable, but Derek finally approached Dr. Abu Alpha asking if a break from the treatment was a possibility. We felt sure that if I could give my body time to rebuild, I could again endure the treatments more easily. My oncologist gave us little hope of a break from chemotherapy, explaining that I could be removed from the availability of the treatment during that time, or the cancer could gain the strength needed to resist the current treatment. But during the following appointment, Dr. Abu Alpha encouraged us with words of great hope, explaining that the doctors were pleased with my success on the drug, and more opportunities for treatment were evolving quickly. Moreover, the doctor suggested that necrosis of the cancer was a slight possibility, meaning that some of the smaller tumors might be dead, explaining why none had grown in over a year. As we left the doctor's office that day, I looked up at Derek, who had tears welling in his eyes, something I had certainly never seen before. The question in my eyes prompted him to explain, "I don't think it was Dr. Abu Alpha talking to us in there today. I think it was God giving us the hope we have asked for." We were greatly encouraged, feeling for the first time that it might be in God's will to cure me of this cancer. But we were still wondering if God's will was for time off of the chemotherapy drugs. You see, many decisions must be made as one battles cancer. My understanding is the decisions for a woman battling breast cancer are far greater than what I have experienced. To remove just the tumor, or to have a full mastectomy? To have a double mastectomy to prevent a recurrence in the other breast? Chemotherapy after the surgery, or just wait and see? What type of reconstructive surgery, if any? Because the cancer in my body is rare and specific, I have had few options, which thankfully diminished our need to make decisions. However, the few decisions we were forced to make seemed daunting. At this point, we wondered whether it was God's will for us to continue the chemotherapy treatment, as was recommended by Dr. Abu Alpha, or whether we should cease the treatment to allow my body to regain the strength God's design allowed. Dr. Abu Alpha explained that should we remove ourselves from the chemotherapy trial, the administrators of the trial might not allow us to return. More importantly, however, he explained that a hiatus from the treatment could allow the cancer to regain the strength necessary to develop a resistance to the treatment that had arrested the cancer for many months. As I prayed concerning this decision, I realized that more than anything else, I desperately wanted to be faithful. Oh, how I wished to hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Matthew 25, verse 21. I have grown to learn that if we are in his will, we will be protected and blessed with great peace. The circle of protection, my wise friend Grace calls it. My children know that to be disobedient to God, or to those who have been charged with their care, is to step outside of the circle of protection. They are in danger outside of the circle of protection. But how could I be faithful if I was not sure of his will? This I believe to be the tricky part. I learned the answer through prayer. I asked for guidance in what to pray for, assurance that my desire was to fulfill his will, and asked for his will to be clear. Our answer presented itself suddenly, just 3 months later. It was determined by Dr. Abu Alpha that my body would soon be unable to handle further treatment, so in conjunction with other doctors, Dr. Abu Alpha had been researching other options. With the input of other MSKCC doctors, he had decided that the 3 largest tumors in my lungs should be removed surgically. Though the doctors did not expect a cure, the tumors that remained were quite small, sub-centimeter, and the consensus was that the removal of the larger tumors would buy me some time to live without treatment. We were thrilled, not only to be removed from the chemotherapy trial, but to be filled with the hope that God could use this opportunity for a cure. I was required to be off chemotherapy treatment for 1 month before the surgery could take place. The doctor needed to confirm everything with the other doctors before moving forward with our plan, so he asked that I have the chemotherapy treatment that day. Almost a year before, because my white cell counts were often too low for chemotherapy treatment, I had begun giving myself Nuprogen shots to boost my white cell counts. These shots caused bone pain in my back and legs the day or 2 after taking the shots, but they were successful in their job of increasing my white counts each week. By the grace of God, that particular day, my white cell counts were too low for treatment for the first time in almost a year. I had forgotten to take my shots. I was officially done with chemotherapy, at least for a season, and we were thrilled. Almost exactly 1 month later, I entered the hospital for lung surgery. 3 small incisions would be made, 2 on my right side and 1 on my back. Through these incisions, a gifted thoracic surgeon would remove the larger tumors. As Derek and I pulled up in front of the hospital at almost 1 p.m. on July 25, 2006, we were greeted by my sister, mother-in-law, and niece. My mom joined us soon after, once the children were in the safe and loving care of my close friend. The hospital was impressive. They had a beautiful waiting area for my family, and we had a liaison assigned to us to answer all our questions before I was brought in and to communicate between the doctor and family during and after the surgery. Derek and I were soon led back to the pre-surgery suite, where I was led to a curtain-enclosed bed. I found waiting for me a hospital gown, a pair of cozy socks, and a garment bag for my clothes, which would be delivered to my room where I would recover after my surgery. High class indeed. A nurse inserted an IV, and I was soon ready to proceed to the surgery room. I was given the option to walk, which thrilled me, as I have found I feel really silly being wheeled around on a bed when conscious and perfectly capable of walking. After giving Derek one last kiss, I was led down a beautiful hallway decorated with ornate murals, which I would have enjoyed showing Derek. I then walked into the surgery suite, hopping up on the thin little table, said hello to the surgeon, was introduced to the other medical technicians in the room, and was covered by the fanciest electric heating blanket ever created. I loved that blanket. I do not even remember the start of the anesthetic, but the next memory is waking in the recovery room with Derek sitting quietly beside me. I spent only a few hours in the recovery room, I am told, where I was attended to with great care by a nurse who had only one other patient. Derek was never made to leave, and my periodic awakenings were soothed knowing he was beside me. At around midnight that night, I was taken to my room, where my roommate was abruptly awakened by the illumination of all lights in the room while I was being settled by my caregivers. A pull-out chair was next to my bed, where Derek would sleep that night and several nights to come. That night, I slept fitfully, but whenever I awoke, I was overwhelmed with happiness and gratitude for all my blessings. Some would say this was the work of the drugs, but I knew God was there with me. Laura was my second roommate after my lung surgery at Sloan Kettering Memorial Hospital. I was not planning on having a roommate. I figured dealing with a roommate was one more unknown I did not want to face, and Derek and I had therefore agreed that we would pay whatever the extra cost for a private room. However, I stood alone at the administration desk completing the pre-admission paperwork. Derek had gone to run a quick errand for me, as it was explained that I had the option for a private room. Before I had the opportunity to respond in the affirmative, I was told the extra cost would be $558 a night. Excuse me? That could not possibly be right. But it was in fact correct, and I promptly told them that I would be thrilled to share a room with another patient. I was wheeled into a semi-private room at almost midnight the night of my surgery, and my sweet elderly roommate was quiet and asleep. I did not meet her until the following morning, during which time I was calmed by her frequent singing of hymns. I had only known her for a few hours when she was released from the hospital, and Laura was immediately moved in. Laura had been in another room but had been dissatisfied with her roommate, and when she noticed someone leaving from my room, she demanded to be moved. She arrived cranky, which I quickly learned was her standard behavior. It did not take her long to complain about the temperature, the noise made by my visitors, my television, and the fact that she was sure the food service staff was delivering me more appetizing food than they were offering her. She yelled, without reservation, at anyone who stepped into her room. Her language was such that I was thankful my children were not present. Later in the afternoon on the second day of my recovery, Derek planned a trip to the local pharmacy to pick up a few necessities we had left behind. I was impressed as he bravely stuck his head into Laura's side of the room and asked if she needed anything. We had noticed that throughout the past 2 days, not one person had come to visit the older woman. Derek reasoned that this might have something to do with her crankiness. I heard a silence behind the curtain, and I braced myself for my sweet husband to receive a tongue lashing equivalent to others I had witnessed over the course of our being roommates. But the tirade never came. She politely asked Derek if he would pick her up a toothbrush, and she seemed genuinely grateful for his willingness to do this. From that moment on, we were in good graces with Laura, which was a significantly more pleasant place to be than the alternative. Over the next couple of days, Laura became a sweet friend. She confided after watching Derek's attentive care of me that she had been married many years before, but her husband had returned to Italy without her. She never remarried and she had no children. She had lived in New York City most of her life, working as a taxi driver until just a few years before. I would have believed no woman was capable of being a city taxi driver, but Laura was as tough as they come. Despite her many years in the city, she had only one niece, and no one else she would consider family or friends. She did have a small dog at home, whom she missed very much. She asked me to make him a stuffed toy, like the ones I make for my girls, not because they were impressive, but because it felt nice to be doing something for them even though I was away. She initially asked me to make a stuffed elephant for a little boy she knew, and it pleased me to hear that she must have a young family with whom she was close. It was not until I presented the toy to her that she confessed that the toy was for her dog, Nicholas. In those first days after the surgery, I found the combination of the test tube and a lung that was slow to heal was causing me great pain. Though I was always sore, that was pain I could handle. Occasionally, however, the pain would quickly increase, and I would cry into Derek's arms while the nurses and pain team attempted to control the pain shooting through my back, chest, and side. I thought I had felt the worst of it, but as it turned out, my greatest pain crisis was to occur while Derek was not present. Thankfully, I was with Mrs. Milligan, who was a great comfort, but I was desperate for Derek. I was terrified that my lungs were collapsing and I was going to die. After just a few minutes, the pain was so intense that I became afraid, instead, that I was going to live, and I didn't think I could handle one more minute of the intensifying pain. I am sure others have endured greater pain, but this was the worst I had experienced, and I determined it was my limit. I cried and I cried and I cried, mostly silently as I struggled for air. Mrs. Milligan called Derek, and he came quickly. Eventually, the pain team pushed a drug into my IV that decreased the pain enough for me to breathe and feel capable of bearing the pain that remained. The 30 or 40 minutes that I felt that pain, my only path to comfort was prayer. I prayed desperately in Christ's name for the pain to cease. I have prayed this prayer before, during the birth of Luke 5 years before, successfully. But to this current prayer, there appeared to be no response. As the pain continued, I became angry with God. I have heard of others speaking about their anger with God in difficult times, and I had always acknowledged this as an understandable response. But I admit I was surprised and taken aback by my anger. I had never before felt true anger towards my God before, and it increased my fear and confusion. My world would be shattered if God no longer listened to my prayers, if he no longer cared. However, this fear did not keep my screaming prayers from God's ears. I have asked in Christ's name for this pain to stop. Why is it not stopping? I have told you that I cannot handle it anymore. You promised me that I would not have to endure more than I could handle. I cannot handle this. Though I did not hear his voice, I quickly felt his peace and his comfort. My anger vanished, though the pain did not. I found myself praying a vastly different prayer that could only be the Holy Spirit speaking to me. I do not always understand your ways, but I trust you. Though I do not see how my pain at this moment can bring you any glory, I will have to trust you. I will offer this pain and anything else I have to you. My pain and fear caused me to forget that not only would God always remember me, he has given us amazing assurance in the book of Isaiah. I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me. I was blessed at this moment to remember that God is incapable of forgetting us and incapable of breaking his promises. It was several more minutes before the pain began to subside. I sat rigid afterwards, leaning on Derek, but afraid to move for fear the pain might return. A few minutes later, the curtain separating my space from that of my roommate opened slightly. "Kristen?" Laura tentatively asked. "Yes," I responded quietly and carefully. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I am okay now." Her response was one that I will never forget. It was not only a response from her, but a response from God. How he blessed me by sharing a small part of his plan. "Kristen, I was so afraid while you cried. I felt helpless, and all I could think of to do was to pray. I haven't prayed in 40 years. Wow. I was completely awed by God's mercy and grace. I don't think I responded to Laura, but I pray she sensed my appreciation and how much her action impacted me. Laura was discharged later that day. Her niece came to drive her home, but she did not even come into the room to help Laura downstairs. It made me sad. As Laura left, she told me that she should be angry with me. She confided that after 40 years of not praying, it seemed the floodgates had been opened and she could not stop. Hallelujah. I do not know where Laura is now. Unfortunately, I did not get her address, and I do not even remember her last name. I suspect she did not have a permanent address at that point because she was leaving to finish her recovery in a local YWCA. I do, however, pray for her regularly, and I have faith that God has continued to work miracles in her life. The beds are kept full at Sloan Kettering Memorial Hospital, and it was only a few hours before my third roommate was wheeled into our room. It was late at night, and although I was awakened by the nurses turning on all the lights and working to settle her as if no one else was in the room, I remained awake because I was curious. Would my next roommate be as difficult, as interesting, or ultimately as much of a blessing as the first? I was sure this would not be the case, but God had more surprises for me. Jill was as different from Laura as a person could be. She was only hours out of her ninth, lung surgery, and she was cheerfully chatting with each of the nurses as if they were old friends. I did not speak to her until the following morning, but I was taken aback with her then as I had been the night before. She was externally beautiful despite her ordeal the previous day, but I was most impressed by the beauty that glowed from within. Her spirit overflowed with joy, peace, and thankfulness. My first thought about my new friend was, this girl knows Christ. And I was right. Over the following 4 days, I figuratively sat at the feet of Jill as I imagined Mary sat at the feet of Jesus. She had so much to teach me through her love and thoughtfulness towards everyone around her. She had so much love to share that it was not surprising she had an adoring husband, 2 beautiful children, and a brother who flew to NYC from Atlanta to sit by her side after every surgery she had endured. I listened as she shared her story of the past 4 years. She had endured chemotherapy after chemotherapy, finding none that worked to kill or arrest the rare lung cancer that had invaded her body. The only effective treatment that had been found was for the largest tumors to be removed every few months. And she credited Dr. Flores with her life. He was the only doctor in the country who had the ability to do what she needed him to do every few months. For her and for me, he was a godsend. Jill and I agreed that God worked miracles through the gifted hands of Dr. Flores. As Jill shared her story, she never once showed any sign of feeling sorry for herself. This was not because she was tough, though she was. It was because all else was overcome by her joy. I have never seen such joy, and you can imagine my surprise at meeting such a special woman at Sloan Kettering. While the Cancer Center is all about offering hope to those blessed to be there, it is also often filled with heartache, disappointment, and defeat. These are understandable responses to facing cancer, but they were not shared by Jill. I was enormously blessed by our few short days together. I was uplifted and inspired by her strength, determination, and contagious joy. God knew she was just what I needed to rejuvenate me for any challenges to come. Jill and I kept in touch. Though she lived with her family in Michigan, she returned to NYC just 4 months later for her 10th lung surgery. Her spirit remained joyful always. Jill passed away 2 days after her 11th lung surgery, just 2 weeks after my second lung surgery, in September of 2007. Jill's beautiful spirit now shines on all the angels of heaven, and she suffers no more. However, her husband, her children, and the multitudes who loved her would benefit from your prayers. Jill is and will always be my hero.